Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Ben Hunt is a researcher, speaker, and advocate of the carnivore diet. Ben was intrigued by the potential benefits of a carnivore diet, so he decided to test it out. To his amazement, Ben found that not only did it improve his physical health, but also allowed him to better understand his addictions to things like alcohol, sugar, and caffeine. By stripping these substances away, Ben was able to face his emotions and find a happier, more authentic version of himself. Ben now encourages others to try a 90-day carnivore diet challenge to see the transformative effects of increased energy levels, elimination of digestive issues, improved mental health, and better overall health. He created the Big Fat Challenge as that 90-day coaching program that offers support, guidance, and community for those who are interested in the carnivore diet. His latest book is called The Red Pill Food Evolution, which he wrote with former podcast guest Phil Escott, who we hosted on episode 564 of Boundless Body Radio. The book encourages readers to discover the hidden history of how food has been used over the centuries to make humanity weak, sick, and dependent, and how to fix it. Ben Hunt, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Thank you so much, man. Really appreciate it.
It's an honor to have you. We've talked about doing this for quite a while now, so it's so great to chat with you. We've got a lot to talk about today, including some upcoming events that you have. You must be so excited for. So we'll definitely get to that. Tease that in the very beginning. But before we get to that, I want to hear about your own personal story and interest in health. It occurs to me that most people find the carnivore diet because they're suffering through some kind of like health issue. And that doesn't really seem to be your story. Yours is a little bit unique in that way. Is that right?
It's really quite unique because I think a lot of people discover the carnivore diet or paleo, low carb, whatever, through being vegetarians or vegans. That didn't really apply to me. I was vegetarian for a few years in my 20s and whatever, but it was plants that got me into it, bizarrely, but through a weird route. So let me try and explain. So 11 years ago, I moved into a big house with my ex, and we had 2 acres of garden. And with having small kids at the time, I thought it'd be really cool to start getting into like growing some of our own veg and stuff like that. I thought that was a really good idea. So I started digging. I got one little patch of this thing, and I spent like 2 hours digging this thing over into a pure, taking all the little rocks and the stones and the all the weeds and everything, got it to a lovely tilth, this thing. And I had an elderly neighbor who lived at a cottage down at the bottom of my garden. He was leaning over the fence and he went, "That's not no dig, is it?" And I thought, what the hell do you mean? What's this no dig? So, because I'm a curious person, right? My whole life, when I look back, I'm 51 now. If I look back, I think, well, what's my life been about? It's been about trying to figure out how we can all be happy and healthy walking free on the earth, right? How do you exist as a happy and healthy human being, right? So I went and looked up no dig, and I started following like Charles Dowding and the Back to Eden method and different things, and I got infected by this idea because at the time I subscribed completely to the climate change paradigm. That man-made climate change was a huge problem. I've done a complete 180 on that now, but that's not entirely relevant. And I thought, wow, this is a great idea. You can build soil. You can build soil when you grow food, or you can build soil by raising animals as well. And so I started getting myself tickets to seminars and conferences and stuff, from the Sustainable Food Trust, the Oxford Real Farming Conference and stuff. So I started going along to these gigs, and people were talking about some stuff that was completely new to me, like the importance of ruminant animals for building soil. And I thought that sounds a bit weird. And then other really strange ideas started to creep in, like people were talking about how good meat was really, really important for human health. And like everybody else, aside from knowing that carbon dioxide was a pollutant, I absolutely knew that red meat gave you cancer and saturated fat clogged your arteries, and we should all be eating less of it. I knew that for a fact. But this was a new idea, and of course I had to go and explore it. So I started looking around. I came across like Gordon Peterson, Michaela Peterson, eating nothing but meat, and realized there were people in this world walking around eating nothing but animal products. And then I came across my friend Bill Escott's Facebook group, 100% Carnivore and Beyond, and met Phil. And before long, we'd set up a group of people looking into not just carnivore, but carnivore being one of the main legs of the stool, but teaching people about biohacking and improving their health. So I started applying it in my life with a few teething problems. I mean, I did suffer from gout really severely for a couple of years, which personally I think that was an adaptation issue. I'd never had gout before, but I think that was actually triggered by oxalate dumping after I cut out the plants, and also, but I was drinking heavily. Like I'd have 6-7 pints of beer per night on average every night of the week, kind of thing. So heavy drinker, and so that combined with oxalate dumping, combined with minor traumas to my feet, would trigger an attack that felt as like an arthritic attack that felt very, very much like gout. It's absolutely horrible affliction. But thankfully that has now cleared up. I haven't had an attack of that in about a year. So hopefully we've seen the back of that. So yeah, very strange story that it was actually growing my own vegetables that got me into carnivore.
It's a very strange statement. I love that. You lost all credibility when you said your age. You're not 51, my friend.
51 and a half now. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. You don't look 51 at all. I can
Thanks,
tell you've
man.
got 51 years of experience. You've gone through a lot and learned a lot. That's amazing. Okay, I just curious. What was the timing of the gout attack? This is just my own speculation and observation of what I've seen.
Yeah.
I've seen that happen before, and it seems to be about 6 months that like people can experience a flare up, and it's like this one last kind of major flare, and then it seems to go away. Is that about the same timing for you, or different?
I think it's hard looking back, because every time I had one I thought, oh, not again, I'll get rid of this. And I didn't take sometimes I took the short-term drugs, but I didn't take the allopurinol, which is the one that they give you, say take one of these every day and it'll protect you. I thought, screw that, because I just don't believe in the allopathic way. I had 5 or 6 different attacks, and they were spaced out by maybe about 3 months apart, or maybe 6 months apart. It's possible that they may also have kind of been around with equinoxes, but I didn't take good enough records of that, though, unfortunately. But they were always a few months apart, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Well, thank you for sharing that. I do have some questions about the gardening experience for you. I'll ask those later. I want to ask about your own personal experience and keep going with that. We mentioned in the introduction things like sugar and caffeine and alcohol. How difficult were those for you to step away from, and what did you notice once you did?
Oh, that's an awesome question. Because right, let me give you some backup. Like you said very accurately at the start, that a lot of people have kind of forced into carnivore keto because they've got major health issues. And I've always kind of envied people who had to go strict, because I always knew that I could get away with a weekend on pizza, ice cream, and beer, here and there if I needed to. Whereas, people like my friend Phil, if he did that, he would pay a huge price for weeks afterwards. So I always thought, well, my gut was never that damaged, or I never had an autoimmune condition, stuff like that. So I was always kind of dirty carnivore. And I might have a couple of strict weeks, and then I'd go for it, have a Ben and Jerry's or a crate of beer. And I always got away with it. It seemed like we got away with it. And so I was kind of missing out on something. And also something Anthony Chapin said, he said that 95% of the benefits come when you cut out the last 5% of the plant. And I thought, well, and by this time, Phil and I were coaching people on the Big Fat Challenge. And we've been doing it for nearly a year. And I'd never done strict carnivore. So I thought, well, when January 1st of this year, 2024 came around, I thought, let's do a 90-day strict challenge myself. So I cut out everything. I cut out alcohol, and like I said, I was drinking heavily, 100 units a week or whatever it was. No, probably nearly double that. So I was drinking a lot of alcohol. I was also smoking tobacco, and for me, alcohol and caffeine always, alcohol and coffee always, kind of went hand in hand, because with alcohol, you quite often have to get up and pee in the night, and you don't sleep that deeply either. And then so you wake up in the morning, you're already behind the game. So you start hitting the coffee and sometimes the carbs as well, to try and kickstart the engines for that day. But then and you can end up having a coffee at like 2 p.m. and then maybe 3 p.m. or whatever. And then by the time the evening comes around, you're still wired, you're still buzzing. And then you hit the alcohol again to put a stop on the day and to bring you back down. And so I was doing a lot of coffee, a lot of booze, smoking cigarettes, and kind of addicted to carbs, like everyone else. But I didn't realize how much. And I cut them all out. January 1st, I cut them all out together and just went to fatty meat like I knew was going to work. And it was bizarre, Katie, because the alcohol and the tobacco, not a problem. I just dropped those like a stone. They were fine. That was easy. The really tough things, the caffeine and the wheat and the sugar. Because I'd let myself, have a cheat day every now and again. The first week in particular, all I could do was fantasize about day 91, when I was going to have the biggest binge. I was going to have chocolate dipped in ice cream, everything. I was going to have pizza covered in chocolate spread, or whatever. I could think about nothing else that first week. And I had a friend, John Tesla, who said to me, by the time 90 days comes around, day 91, you're not going to want that stuff. I went, bullshit. I'm gonna go crazy after this. But he was right. That the most insidious drugs that are available on the market today, I believe, are sugar and wheat and coffee. And then going through that process, what I learned, because I also did a daily video diary as well, which we put on our Substack, Big Fat Substack, and I was just honestly just speaking for a few minutes every day, straight into my phone. This is what's going on for me, and yeah, I realized so much about the nature of these drugs. And to me, they are drugs. I heard somebody at the PHC conference May 23, saying these are this stuff is not food. These things, we should see these things as recreational drugs, which is what they are. And they are more addictive than things like heroin and cocaine. Now, we know that sugar lights up the brain in the same way that crack does. Wheat hits the opiate receptors in your brain, stimulates them, in the same way that morphine and heroin do. But what I realized was that these drugs, I was using them, right? And the reason I was using them was to stop feeling. Because life, when you're going from one dopamine hit to another, from junk food and stuff like that, it's like a life of comfort. But the way that I came to understand it is, it's comfort in the medical sense of comfort. When people say, all we can do at this point is to try and make him comfortable, make her comfortable. What they mean is anesthetize them, right? Don't stop them from feeling. If something's aesthetic, it's to do with the world of feelings and emotions, right? And aesthetic just means you are cutting out the feelings. It doesn't mean you stop feeling pain. It means you stop feeling anything. That's what anesthetic means, and that's what it is. It dulls your life. Your highs become less high. Your lows become less low, and you're just stumbling from one dopamine hit to the next. And when your life is dominated by dopamine, then it dulls your ability to experience true joy, through serotonin and oxytocin, much more profound neurotransmitters, in my view. So I noticed that I was clearly using these drugs in order not to feel. And then because I was I'd given my word that I wasn't going to use them in that period, I then had to face what I was trying not to feel. And I went, actually, you know what? I'm okay. It's fine. Yes, something might happen. I might get a hit, an emotional hit, and I might think, I really want some chocolate right now, or I really want a mocha right now, or whatever, or a bottle of wine. And then I'd go, you know what? This feeling isn't too bad. And I think that a lot of us are actually running away from a profound fear of, if I really feel my feelings, and if I just strip away all the props in my life, that what I'll discover when I'm left naked, it's standing up naked in the wind, and just see the real me, that I've discovered that I'm not worthy. I don't like who I am. I don't deserve love, you know. But there's only one way to find out about that, and to find out that that's not true, which is to go through it. So I did that. I think I had 1 week on coffee in the middle of that, and then I got to the end of it. And interestingly, we were just running a conference at the time at Easter, because that came at the end of March. And I went down to the pub on the night of day 90. I had like 3 pints of beer, and then I went, no, I'm not bothered about that. And now, I might have an alcoholic drink every couple of weeks, but I'm just really not fussed about it. So now I feel like I've been through that. Now I can kind of pick and choose.
Amazing. Wow, what a cool story. I think we're also afraid of what we're going to discover on the other end of that. And so, yes, it is easier temporarily to find something to numb us out and block those feelings. But it's cool to know that you got to the other side and recognize that you were okay, you were lovable, you were, fun to hang around with, being yourself. I think that's great. It's funny what you said at the beginning of that with, looking at Phil and kind of envying him and how strict he has to be. We all kind of envy each other. I listen to your story and I'm like, man, I'd love to have a pizza here and there. I'd love to have some of these things. And as what I've learned about myself, I'm more of a moderator. I can't have any, but it does come with pros and cons. If I can't have anything other than what fits inside my carnivore diet, then it's really simple for me. I don't need to make decisions all the time about the things I should be eating. That's already defined for me. So yeah, it's interesting that there are pros and cons to being a moderator or an abstainer.
Yeah, I do actually feel like I'm an abstainer, really, and because if I let myself have a sugary drink or some chocolate or something, it creeps in, and then it does start to take over. So yeah, I guess, yeah, with alcohol, I can take it or leave it now. But the sugar stuff, nah, you, you're just better off without it. And
Yeah.
we do these crazy things, We go and poke the bear. You think, oh, I've been off sugar or coffee or something or whatever for 4 weeks or 6 weeks, and then you go, I've got this now. I can float with it again. But that's insanity. It's like an alcoholic saying, oh, I'll have a couple of whiskeys now. I'll be fine because I've got on top of this. I don't need it. And why do we keep going back and poking it again? That's just insanity. Just
Yeah.
leave it alone.
Yeah.
But we hate this idea of never again, don't we? So I'm never going to have chocolate again. I'm never going to have anything sugar. I'm never going to have a cheesecake or a dessert. And that is kind of tough. But you can just flip that to say, for today, I'm choosing this. And you need to. What I found is that I needed to find a bigger why than the why to have the cheesecake or the muffins or whatever, right? And so if you don't genuinely believe that you off caffeine, sugar, and wheat and stuff is preferable to you on that stuff, you're going to go back to it. Right? You're just kidding yourself if not. So we have to find a bigger and better why. And so we're telling the truth to ourselves about that. Right? Say, I'm so grateful that I feel clear when I wake up in the morning. So grateful that I'm sleeping 8 hours through the night. That was a beautiful thing. Because it's like January as well. I was getting to 8:30 in the evening, and I'm going, I'm just really tired. I'm just going to take my ass to bed, and then that's it. And then I shut my eyes. And whereas quite often in the past I'd be awake for 2 hours, go to bed, I'd pick up my phone, I'd be playing chess on my phone or something. was nothing like that. I put on like an audio book or a podcast, not one of yours, but someone else's podcast, and I fall straight asleep. You know what I mean? It's great, but podcasts and audiobooks are great for that. 2 minutes and I'm gone. Yeah, that was amazing. So yeah, really, we've got to recognize that the human body and soul are amazing and beautiful things, and actually, the human existence in its raw state is incredible and beautiful. And you don't need drugs to try and enhance that state. You can't improve on a true human experience when you're living a natural life. I don't think.
Yeah,
The
I love
rest of
that.
it. And another thing about caffeine, this really hit me hard, because I heard somebody once years and years ago said that drugs, when you take drugs, you're borrowing energy from the future. And it really got me. The caffeine and sugar as well, kind of like that, because but it's not just that you're borrowing energy, because it seems like it's energy, right? But what it's actually doing is it's masking your tiredness, and tiredness being a neurotransmitter message from your body that it's time to rest. That's what tiredness is. Tiredness isn't a real thing, right? Tiredness is a signal, like hunger is a signal. Hunger isn't a real thing. You know what I mean? And thirst, these are either hormonal or neurotransmitter impulses in your brain that tell you it's time to do something. And the way that caffeine works is it actually, that, and I went and looked this up because I wanted to know. So this might be interesting for anyone who's hooked on coffee or whatever. The way that caffeine works is, that when the mitochondria in our cells produce ATP for energy, that's adenosine triphosphate. So it's an adenosine molecule with 3 phosphates attached, phosphorus and oxygen. And the way it does that is it generates these things, and then when a cell uses an ATP for energy, one of the byproducts is adenosine on its own. And adenosine is a neurotransmitter. And when the adenosine starts to build up in your brain has receptors for adenosine to say when it gets to a certain level, then we trigger tiredness, right? And what caffeine does is it numbs the adenosine receptors. That's all it does. I mean, it does a load of other things as well, some of which are not very beneficial because it is a neurotoxin. But it just hides the fact that you're tired. Your body is saying, hello, tired, and that means rest because your brain needs to recover and repair. And the caffeine just keeps smashing the light that says tiredness. So, and it does feel like when you do that, when you use caffeine to hide your tiredness or to trick yourself that you're not tired, and then you kind of genuinely are not tired because tiredness is only a message. So you're intercepting the message, right? So it never gets through. But you do have to pay that back, but you have to pay it back with interest. So to me, that the use of caffeine to trick yourself into not being tired, it's almost like taking a payday loan at 30% or 100% APR or whatever, and thinking you've got money, thinking you're rich. No, you're not rich because you've got to pay that back with interest in the future. And that was very much the case with caffeine.
I really love that explanation. That was great. I was just in San Diego for the Symposium for Metabolic Health, and Dr. Chafee gave a presentation, and somebody asked him in the presentation, like, hey, you just said that plants are trying to kill you. What about coffee? And he's like, well, coffee comes from a plant, so it's trying to kill you as well. I thought there was going to be a small riot in the conference center. Another speaker got up later and said, coffee's probably okay for you. And everybody, I thought they were going to throw him a parade or something for saying that. But that's a really great point. And I don't know, I think the important thing is people can make the decision on whether they want to drink coffee or not drink coffee. It's the informed consent. It's knowing that makes it really important. And then you can make the decision. Do you feel okay on it? Do you react okay? Or are you ignorant to the fact that this could be causing harm and you don't know about it? You need to know about these things before you can make an informed decision. And a lot of people, I wish more people understood what you mentioned earlier, which is like you're thinking that you can never have these things ever again. You're never going to make it in this world without having the cake or the beer or the coffee, whatever. But it's like you said, like on day 91, you were planning a bender. You get to day 91, you don't want to go on a bender. Why would you want to make yourself feel terrible when you're feeling the best you've ever felt in your life? That this stuff doesn't even taste that good anymore. Like you're not going to want to go back to feeling like crap once you're feeling amazing.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And that's what I would recommend to anyone. And don't say never, never again. But say for 90 days and just do it as an exercise in integrity and an exercise in I'm doing this because I gave my word and no other reason.
Yeah.
And do it as an N=1 experiment. Just find out for yourself.
Yeah.
You know?
I love that.
I'm a
Yeah.
huge believer in N=1. That we don't all function in exactly the same way because, yeah, we've got some slight genetic differences between us, but we're all coming from a different place of damage. We've all
Yep.
been damaged in different ways, emotionally and physiologically as well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. I think it was Peter Bruckner who came on stage at one of these conferences and said an N=1 study is the only study that matters when you're the N=1. No study is relevant to how you feel. Like we can try to do the science and nutrition, and the reality is it's very difficult to do, but the N=1 is what is most important. It's your own case study and what you're willing to live with and what you're willing to sacrifice. So I love that. I did want to go back to your gardening. I marvel at this all the time, and I think we miss this. A lot of people around me also have gardens. And if you just kind of think about this practically, like this time of year especially, a lot of people start gardens in the springtime. It's lovely outside. It's really nice around me. It gets to be 100 degrees in July. It's very, very hot, very, very dry. People stop working in their gardens. So over time, their gardens look pristine, and then there's lots of weeds, and then they're not taking care of anything. A lot of the food they were growing goes to waste. Just on a practical basis, as far as like gardening, raising plants for consumption, why does it make any sense to even try that when calorically, just looking at calories, the amount of work that you have to do to raise plants versus what your reward is at the end? I would argue you get some really tasty plants if you know what you're growing and know what you're doing, but it's so much work. It doesn't even make sense as a species that we would ever do that as a primary way to get food, correct?
Yeah, in a way. But I mean, I wrote about this quite a lot in the Red Pill Food Revolution. Farming is incredibly hard work. Gardening is incredibly hard work. You know, they say, you know, like growing tomatoes is a fantastic way to invest 3 months of your life to save $4.36, you know, at the grocery store. It really is ridiculous. And the reality is that you are, I mean, I'm going to come out and say I'm really anti-agriculture, plant agriculture. Monocrop, row crop agriculture is a terrible thing. But the reasons why we do it are also understandable. Now, one of the things to appreciate is that you can get about something like 20,000 times more calories per unit of land through farming and crops like potatoes and wheat than you can by hunting. Right. So calorically, in terms of what you get from the land, you get masses more from plants. But the problem is that it's not sustainable. It's also inequitable. So one of the, I mean, in the book, we talk about this as one of the main sources of the degeneration in the human condition, was the fact that was when we moved to farming, we were kind of forced to do it. It took thousands and thousands of years, but really around the time of the end of the last ice age, 10 to 12,000 years ago, and farming popped up at several places, the Eastern Mediterranean and in China around 10,000 years ago, and other places, you know, later on. England about 2,000 years ago, because Julius Caesar wrote about it, wrote about the English learning farming from the Dutch, and the Scottish, where I am now. I've just moved up to Scotland. In Scotland, they've only had it for 1,500 years, so there's no whiskey older than that. Yeah, it's really quite complex. But if I go to the trouble of clearing this bit of land, I have to remove all the rocks and the boulders and the trees and cut down the trees and the stumps and all the hedges and stuff. And I eradicate everything from the land. It's backbreaking work. And then I should, by rights, feel like I'm entitled quite literally to reap the rewards from that harvest of that land. But then we've moved from a kind of spiritually, from a state of knowing that we belonged on the land to thinking the land belongs to us because I've cleared that land, therefore it's mine. And then it goes down to my son and whatever like that. And then you get into an unequal power structure where somebody wants food and they haven't got any land. You say, well, you can work on my land and I will give you some grain. And then grain then becomes, because you can store it for months on end, that grain then becomes the first source of wealth. Because prior to that, if I created 30 flint-headed spears, what's the point? There's no reason for me to be rich in spears if I can't trade that many spears for other stuff that I needed, because I can't use that many spears. You would only take from nature, which is bountiful and abundant. You'd only take what you needed, and you'd probably spend 15 to 20 hours a week exerting yourself like modern hunter-gatherer tribes do today. And the rest of the time you'd be chilling and you'd be fine. You'd sing songs and do crafts and whatever you wanted to do. But then when we moved to agriculture, suddenly we're working far more than that. And then you've got obviously all the problems with agriculture, which is that it actually destroys soil. And we found that you drag a stick through the soil, it turns the soil over, and it appears to make it more fertile, which it does in the short term. Because what you do when you do that, all soil in nature, if you ever see bare soil in nature, nothing's growing on it by definition. So soil, true soil in nature, for it to be soft and rich and flaky and everything, it's supposed to have a blanket or a skin of decaying organic matter on top of it that protects it from the UV light, protects it from the raindrops and everything else. So what you do is when you come along and just drag a stick through, you turn that stuff over, you kill a lot of worms and reptiles and stuff that lives in the soil. You rip up the mycorrhizal fungal networks in the soil. You expose the bacteria and archaea and other small arthropods in the soil to the ultraviolet light from the sun and the oxygen, and they die. And a lot of the carbon in the soil then oxidizes and floats up into the air as CO2. But all that death that you create when you plow or till the soil, that releases nitrogen, because all living things have nitrogen in their cells. So that releases nitrogen that makes the plants go ping and grow better. And you think, wow, I am making the soil more fertile by tilling it, but it's not true, because after between 500 and 1,000 years, you kill the soil. There's no carbon left. It loses its darkness, right? So it can't hold moisture anymore. And the more the moisture runs away and takes any remaining goodness down into the seas and the oceans. And David Montgomery, a geologist called David R. Montgomery, he wrote a book called Dirt, the Erosion of Civilization. He tracked that all these civilizations, the ancient Greeks, the Mesopotamians, the Aztecs, the Minoans, all of them, with the exception of the ancient Egyptians, all of them burnt out as a civilization between 500 and 1,000 years. And he maintains that the reason they burnt out is because they destroyed their soil. The ancient Egyptians are different because they get a flood every year that washes fresh soil down from the Ethiopian plateau that floods the Nile Delta. And so they were then able to keep farming there for 2,500 years. And they became expert farmers, and they lived off mainly bread and beer, and they pressed a load of seed oil. But they also invented first ever records of diabetes, heart attacks, and dementia as well.
Wow.
So farming's interesting, but here's the thing: with gardening or with farming, you are in a battle against nature. We like to think that vegans like to say, hunters are all aggressive and trying to dominate nature. It's bullshit. And you've had Leah Keith on your show, I think, as well.
Yeah. Just thinking about her right now.
I love Leah and her story about trying to be a vegan and trying to grow lettuce in her garden.
My favorite story.
her war against the slugs, it's hilarious, but it's heartbreaking at the same time. You are fighting against Mother Nature, and nature, everything in nature is like multi-layered. That you look at one patch of you take a square yard of anywhere in nature, and you look at that throughout the year, there'll be dozens of different species of plants growing up in that same area, and countless animals. We're only just beginning to learn about the complexity of the soil. And you're fighting against all of that by saying, no, we're going to grow one crop from here to the horizon and there and there. Well, you've got to kill every damn living thing except for the one species that you want to permit to live. And you're constantly, and what they're saying, you're trying to, gardening is a constant attempt or to try and kill loads of things that want to live and try and make, to try and nurture one thing that wants to die or something like that. But that's what it is. It's real hard work.
Wow.
And so it's utter insanity. And of course, it can't give our bodies the nutrients and the minerals and everything in the right balance that we need.
Yep. So well explained. I love the way you guys write about this. And I'm so glad you brought up Leah Keith. I was just thinking about her as you were explaining all of this, the wonderful author of The Vegetarian Myth, and something that she said that sticks out to me so much. A plant-based diet is not good for anything. You think it's good for health? It's not. You think it's good ethically? It's not. You kill everything. You think it's good for the planet? It's not. You're drawing down resources that are not going to be replaced. It is not good for any of the things that people say that it's good for, yet they continue to just bang on that drum that's like, you have to do this for the planet, vegan Fridays, whatever concept they come up with. It's worse for all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. The vegan philosophy has only been around since the 1950s anyway, but
That's right.
I'm sure you and I are completely on the same page about all of that. But it's not the way to go. And really, the conclusion that we came to in the Red Pill Food Revolution was to say humans should be eating large animals. And yes, the megafauna disappeared at the end of the last ice age for whatever reason. Climate change being one of them, genuine climate change. And but yeah, we have cattle and we have sheep and plenty of animals that we can eat. But yeah, our conclusion is, because people say, well, how can you possibly feed 10 billion people if everyone's eating steaks, right? But it's a silly question, because we can't feed 10 billion people the way we're doing it now. Well, we kind of can short term, but if we cut out the waste, 40% of whatever food is wasted. But it's if you can't produce your food in a sustainable fashion, then the whole question is null and void. You forget about it. And we aren't producing our food today in anything that's remotely sustainable. Our soil is losing its vitality. It's losing its mineral content. Since the 1950s, it's lost like half of its mineral content.
Wow.
Right? And what are we doing? We're just doubling down with bigger machines and genetic modification and just even more petrochemical nitrogen fertilizers. It's absolutely insane. And while I no longer believe in man-made climate change, I think it's a non-issue anyway, because there is, whatever your views are on man-made climate change, there's a very, very real environmental emergency, but it's going on below our feet, not above our heads.
Yeah.
We are going to wipe ourselves out as a species. So where we got to with it is, we should go back to regenerative farming or hunting and sustainable fishing. And then let natural law figure out the correct population of humans on Earth. I mean, who says we should be able to support 10 billion people on Earth? I don't know.
Great point. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I love the way you guys write about that. So I appreciate that. Okay, so moving on to the challenge that you do, a 90-day challenge. I worked for a major company. My wife and I both worked for a major company where we were forced to take people through 2-month and 3-month weight loss challenges. And it was the standard advice, telling people, big lists of food they needed to buy at the store, lots of vegetables and fruits and all this stuff. There, big packets of recipes that were quite complex, and people were meal prepping and snacking and whatever. And they would, the compliance percentage on these weight loss contests was terrible. Like it was about like 15% was the number that I hear of people that would start the contest and then finish the contest. It wasn't until my wife and I discovered that low carbohydrate diets worked quite well for weight loss and people would actually do them and really enjoyed it that we switched. The company didn't know what we were doing. We started giving people different meal plans, and it was awesome. The compliance percentage went way higher to like 65% of people were getting success, lots of weight loss, lots of fat loss, and it just completely changed our careers as far as like job satisfaction was amazing. So tell us about your 90-day challenge and how it works functionally for somebody that might want to do it.
Yeah, so Phil and I started this at the beginning of 2023, and we ran it. So we originally did it as a 90-day live challenge with coaching calls every day. But since we've gone in different directions in the middle of 2024, but we've still got all of the recorded materials, like 100 hours or something of material that we've put on there. So it doesn't have live coaching calls now, but you can go on there, and it's like $97 for a year's access to the material and anything else that we add. Because really, to do it as a, people say, well, what's the timetable, what's the schedule for it, and it really is down to you. This is the tricky thing. I know we all love to have a like a structure for stuff, but for some people just need to start with cutting out the sugar and then the wheat, and other people like, and I think, when people who are naturally abstainers also kind of quite often do better with, no, I'm going to cut it all out right now, and it's all or nothing kind of, stuff. So yeah, you go along to thebigfatchallenge.com. If you can afford $97, then that's great. If you can't, then there's an option to pay what you can for it, because we don't want to deny this to anyone. There's heaps and heaps of content. There's stuff around. We've even got sessions that you can follow on EFT, the emotional freedom technique for tapping, to get rid of cravings and stuff like that one of our participants provided, which is awesome. But yeah, it dispels all of the myths about meat, fat, vegetables, fruits, all of that stuff. And if there are any questions that don't get answered on there, then you can email your question in, and we will make new material to answer every question. But we've pretty much got every angle covered. For somebody who's curious about low carb, keto, paleo, carnivore lifestyle, it's a really nice way to get into it, and to take it at your pace. But we explain, and we've got lists for, these are foods you can eat as much as you want, or all the way down to foods that you should absolutely avoid at all costs as well. So yeah, no holds barred. It's a great experience, definitely worth doing if that would suit anyone out there.
That's a crazy value. That's a lot of stuff you get for a very, 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 very fair price. So I really love that. It's interesting if somebody were super motivated on carnivore and they didn't have a lot of time and they would just take whatever I said to do as far as lifestyle, not only just nutrition, but the other things that go along with that. If I had, I don't know, 90 seconds, 2 minutes, I could pretty much tell them, just do these things and you'll be fine. And I could know if they understood exactly what I said and actually went out and did it, I would believe 99.9% that they would be totally healthy and happy, whatever. But people do have questions and they need validations. And a lot of times I find myself in individual coaching sessions repeating myself to pretty much everybody when I've already said so much of this stuff. But people need that understanding of like, what if I don't poop ever again? What if I die of a heart attack? Like all these things you need to address. And so having all of that done and recorded for such a low price, I think is an amazing value. So we'll be sure to tag that in the show notes as well. You guys should be very proud of the work you're doing there. And also, again, kind of time sensitive, like we talked about in the very beginning of this episode. You've got 2 different conferences coming up, and one especially is quite unique. So can you tell us about what's coming up?
Well, actually, they are both firsts of their kind. So on mid-September, so less than 2 weeks away now, we've got the first Carnivore Conference is going to be held in the UK. Now, Phil hosted the first European Carnivore Conference, I think in 2019, at an exclusive resort in Spain, which is an old monastery in 2019. And then COVID came along, and we weren't allowed to go the following year. So we're going to do the second one this year in October. But if you go to carnivoreconference.co.uk, the first UK Carnivore Conference is going to be held in the Peak District in England in the middle of September. So I'll give you the dates for that are the 14th and 15th, Saturday the 14th and Sunday the 15th of September. So that's carnivoreconference.co.uk. And I'm going to be speaking at that. We've got Richard Smith, the Keto Pro, who went from being morbidly obese and unable to climb the stairs to champion bodybuilder. Dr. Abs is going to be there. It's really all the UK, the top UK carnivore and keto influencers all in one space. And Dr. Chafee is going to join us by Zoom for a no holds barred Q&A. So that's going to be really, really awesome. But then in October, on Saturday, October 19th, my partner Heather and I are putting on an event called Keto Brain Health Conference. And that's at ketobrainhealth.co.uk. And that's a one-day conference, and it's going to be at the Gorton Monastery in Manchester. Beautiful location. Maximum 550 people are going to be there. And we've got an incredible lineup for that one as well. So welcome. You're going to be there. Who's absolutely wonderful. I remember the first time I heard her speak, my mouth was open the whole time. Richard Smith, again, the Keto Pro, talking about that. We've got Dr. Rachel Brown, the Carnivore Shrink. Ivor Cummins is somebody who I think you know, because Dave Mack mentioned him on your recent discussion as well, that he had a discussion with Gregor, I know. Ivor Cummins, he's fantastic. So he's going to be blowing the lid off statin. So, and then Dr. Anthony Chafee is going to be there in person for that one-day conference before we all fly out to Spain for the exclusive Carnivore Conference. So the point of this is that it's like so many of us know the power and the benefits of the keto or carnivore way of living for health in general, but a ketogenic diet has been studied for over 100 years now for multiple brain health and mental health benefits, going all the way back to epilepsy. People were researching it for epilepsy in the 1920s. And you just don't hear about it. You do not hear enough about it. And there's so much interest in this. So we got ADHD going through the roof, when autism's going through the roof, and a ketogenic diet can help so much with all of these things. So we've got a bunch of people in the room. It's not going to be recorded. It's not going to be streamed. But and this is not like a scientific or academic conference. You go along to some of these and it's like you hear about the latest research. It's all very biochemical, and you're sitting there as even as a lay expert, you're sitting there going, I feel a bit overwhelmed. But this is for real people. So this is for real people to come along. What can you do? What can you apply in your life to protect and support and recover your own brain health and the health of your loved ones? Might be your kids, might even be elderly relatives as well, parents and stuff like that. So we're really, really excited about that one.
That's amazing. Both of those sound absolutely incredible. The mental health thing is so interesting. Again, at the symposium of metabolic health, we had an entire day where all we talked about was ketogenic diets related to mental health. And I've made this point several times, but it's like you go to one of these conferences talking primarily about diet. You would think the whole thing is about like weight loss or something. And it's so interesting how rare that actually even came up. Like we know that, it can help with weight loss, but we're discussing things like weight gain for somebody that has anorexia, and how a ketogenic diet works for these people, and showing the case studies and like all the stories around it. And so I love that you're covering that and that angle specifically of more like the practical kind of stories and things. I think there's a place for both, right? There's a place for the science and the studies and needing to understand the mechanisms behind things, but also the personal testimonies of people that have gone through and done this and healed themselves from all kinds of different things. It's so powerful as well. So I think there's a place for both of those. And I just have to give the dude a shout out. How about Dr. Anthony Chafee, man? He lives in Perth, Australia. That is not the most convenient place to call in from, not the most convenient place to visit. He travels all the time. He does podcast interviews all the time. He was asked a question on stage a few weekends ago, like, how do you have the time to do this? And he's just like, you just have to not have a life outside of any of this. I still have my day job and all the stuff that I have to do, be so lit up and passionate about this. The entire rest of his life is sharing his message and donating his time to answer questions. He's probably answered those questions a million times. He's an awesome guy. I've been so fortunate to be able to meet him, and he is every bit as cool of a guy in person as he puts his persona out there. And he's just so kind and giving. I just can't say enough about him. He's awesome.
100%. I mean, I've interviewed Anthony a lot over the last year or so, and I think some of the credit for that has to go to his parents as well, because they raised him in the belief that if it's in your power to help somebody, then you should do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think, he took a year or so out, during his studies to go off and help in refugee camps in Bangladesh, I think it was as well. The guy, you're absolutely right, Kate. He's as genuinely as nice as he comes across.
Yeah.
And that's a very rare thing, and he deserves every success. And also congratulations on his engagement as well.
Ah, that's right. Yeah, super cool. Yeah.
Awesome.
That's awesome. Well, that's going to be a great experience. Just like my interview with Phil, I actually have like a synopsis of your book and so many topics to discuss and all the different chapters. We basically covered like half of one. You guys do such a good job of the book explaining things. And I know that, this was an awesome conversation, and maybe down the road we could get you back on again to discuss some of the other things you write about, because there's so many interesting rabbit holes that we could go down. But I really wanted to have you on and time this for those conferences that you're hosting. So amazing work with that. I wish I could go, but I know you guys will have an amazing time. We do have lots of listeners in the United Kingdom of the show, so I would very much encourage them to check out the websites and check out your work if they haven't checked it out yet, including the 90-day challenge. But for now, where can people go to find you and connect with you and your work? And once again, can we get the links for those conferences as well?
Yeah, so thebigfatchallenge.com if you want to dive into that. We've got carnivoreconference.co.uk for that one, and we're aiming to run that every year as well from now on. So this is the very first one, and ketobrainhealth.co.uk as well.
Excellent.
So pretty straightforward.
That's great. We will link all of those. Is there any other social media that we should link, or is that all included in the website?
Yeah, not particularly. I think that's great. We've got the Big Fat Substack as well, which is just at bigfat.substack.com. But yeah, other than that,
excellent. That's great.
That's all you need.
Cool. That's perfect. Really
and
simple.
Of course, yeah, look up the Red Pill Food Revolution book. That's available at all reputable and disreputable online booksellers.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you so very much for all of that. We'll link all of that in the show notes. I love your writing, if nothing else, the Substack, your book. I mean, it's just great. You guys do a really great job and have awesome ideas and communicate them really, really well. Along with that is this passion and drive to be able to share the message and actually really help people out there. So I really, really appreciate that, Ben. Thank you so very much for all of your work. Best of luck at the conference. Again, give everybody a big hug. It's a room full of all my friends as well. I'll miss them from the other side of the pond, but I hope everything goes well. And thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy day to be with us today. We really appreciate you.
Thanks, man. It's a delight as always.
It's an honor to host you. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.